Now, I've gotten this question several times fairly recently is, why don't I tie more of my original patterns for the channel? And the simple answer is that I just don't have a lot of original patterns, at least that have done well for me. I've got plenty of experimental flies, but sometimes you take them out in the water and they just don't look or act like you hope they would, so those flies just disappear never to be seen again. But sometimes a new pattern will be promising enough that after a few tweaks I can turn it into a decent fly. And then other times a new pattern it's not really original enough. Maybe it was heavily inspired by another successful fly, or it borrowed components or techniques from another pattern. And that's sort of what I want to tie for you today. Now, I can't remember what fly this may have been inspired from. Could have been something by Jack Gartside because it does use a pheasant aftershaft feather, also called a gimp feather. But the body I'm using for this, it's fairly unique. I use a really fuzzy dubbing, an Angora goat, and then I've got a mylar tinsel for a rib. So I've never seen anything else out there like that, and I feel comfortable enough that I can give this thing a name and not fear that I'm stealing somebody else's pattern. Now, I have fished this thing off and on for a couple of years, and I've had a few good days with it, but until today when I decided to tie it for the channel, I've never given it a name. So henceforth, this fly is going to be called the Angora Gimp. And it's a simple little pattern, but it's a pretty fun tie. So there it is, and the vise, what I've been calling my Angora Gimp. Now, this is a size 14, and I will typically tie these in nymph sizes, 14s, maybe 12s, or a little smaller if you want. Let's pinch that barb, and I'll show you the hook I'm using here. This is the J Stockard. It's a 3X long multi-purpose curved shank hook, and it's their model 430. One of my go-to hooks for nymphs and sometimes streamers. And I do weight this particular pattern. This is some 015. I'm not sure how many wraps, but at least half or 2/3 of the body length. Now, I know that's a lot of weight, but I want it to be pretty heavy because I fished this in fast water and I want it to punch through and get down pretty quickly, and it's a kind of buggy fly. So this is some red thread. This is 70 denier. I'll dam it up front, take a few wraps over it, and then dam it again in the back. Let's take a few extra wraps back. You could put a red tag on it if you want. I've done a few that way. I don't know that it adds that much to it. So let's catch in some tinsel, shiny tinsel. This is a medium gold holographic. Certainly don't need to use a holographic. You could use a mylar, gold or silver. I'm sure it would be perfectly fine. So let's catch that in back here and put a good bit of wax on our thread. Let me park this tinsel out of the way. And it looks like I nicked my thread right there. I think I did, but nah, we're gonna be fine. Now the body I'm using for this, it's an Angora goat. Got all these colors. I want to use the dun right here. I think since we got enough flash and a red head, keeping a natural body is probably a good choice. Now this stuff isn't the easiest to work with. If you don't have Angora goat, wool is going to be fine, but something pretty buggy. And a 3-inch noodle here is only going to give us up to about half the fly, so we'll have to do a couple of applications of this dubbing to get us all the way up front. Okay, that is certainly buggy, but that's why I'm using this goat, because I want it to be quite buggy. But if you think it's too buggy, don't worry about it. This rib is going to, compress a good bit of it down. In fact, probably so much that we'll want to pull some of it out with the dubbing brush in just a minute. Okay, that looks fine, but I want it just a little buggier than that. So I've got my popsicle stick with Velcro on it, and I'm just going to pull it down and get a little bit of, fuzz coming off of it. It'll give us a little bit of life. And if you pull too much off, just snip the really long stuff, but don't snip it, too short, because part of the attractiveness of this fly is a lot of that bugginess. Now the next thing I'm catching in, 2 aftershaft feathers. also called gimp feathers. And I'm gonna just catch them in both at the same time. You could do this with one, but there's a couple reasons I use two. First off, I just want it to be pretty buggy. And then if you happen to break one of these, they're kind of brittle. If you do happen to break one when you're tying it in, you've still got one to work with. You don't have to just start this part all over. Okay, so leave your thread kind of close to where you caught them in, and then just wrap them both at the same time. 3 or 4 wraps if you can get them, or just wrap the whole feather until you get up there to the eye. And don't get too close to the eye, because we do have a prominent head up here, and that's part of the fly is a big red head. So we've got those caught in, and it's a big buggy mess right now, and it's going to be for a couple more minutes until we get our head done. So I don't snip those off yet until I build my head. Now we can whip finish it and then snip those feather tips off. And you can sometimes just pull these, but these are pretty thick right here, so I'm going to snip them. And there we go. No cleanup on a big fuzzy fly like this. Just drop of head cement or UV resin on that head, and you got a pretty fishable fly. So that's it, my friends. I appreciate you watching the Angora Gimp. Y'all take care, and we'll see you next time.